Yeah, excited to be here. My name is John DeLynn. I'm your host. Also want to welcome everyone out. We're live streaming this. I had someone from Facebook reach out to me a week or two ago and said we should consider live streaming our events through Facebook. So we're live streaming on the Mormon Stories page. So hopefully our audience is enjoying and hopefully they can hear us okay. We're so glad you're all here. I want to begin by thanking Club Cafe at 50 West for being such gracious hosts. Jake Jensen's not here. Alicia's also helpful. Let's thank Club Cafe at 50 West for sponsoring us. They're very generous with us. This whole production is put on by the Open Stories Foundation, which is the 501c3 nonprofit that allows all of the many podcasts that many of you are familiar with to happen. So Mormon Stories podcast, the Thoughtful Faith podcast, Mormon Matters podcast, Mormon Mental Health podcast, Gay Mormon Stories podcast, Mormon Transitions podcast. There's a lot of them. We just want you to know that those of you who support the Open Stories Foundation or any of these podcasts, we take your donations very seriously. We're fully transparent with the money you give. We try to be very, very good stewards of that, and this production is sort of a product of that effort. So I want to thank everyone of you, or those of you in the audience who do contribute to one of the various assets that we have, because it makes all this possible. Really quickly, hey Martine, really quickly, the Open Stories Foundation does lots of things in addition to podcasts. We also have been holding events. We've been holding workshops and retreats, and they've been very, very successful, and we're really happy with them. We have a workshop coming up soon in Phoenix, another one soon thereafter in Dallas. You can go to the Mormon Transitions page to read about those two workshops. We have a retreat coming in mid-July in Park City. They've all been received very well, but those workshops and retreats that I'm referring to are for people specifically who are feeling themselves in a transition away from Mormon Orthodoxy and sometimes out of the LDS Church altogether. And these workshops are very positive, they're very uplifting, and they're all about healing and growth in your transition. What we're really excited to announce today is that we've gotten together with Dan and with Natasha Helfer-Parker, Gina, and others, and we've decided that we are going to hold our first retreat specifically targeted towards sort of, Dan's audience, Gina's audience, people who are trying to remain faithfully and constructively engaged within the church. So it's August 26th through 28th. Some of you will see the flyers. Natasha Helfer-Parker, who's an amazing, not only licensed marriage and family therapist, but she's also a licensed sex therapist. But she's also been dealing with people in their Mormon journeys for 20 years. She is a believer. She considers herself a believer.
She's just a fun person.
She's super fun.
Yeah.
She's skilled.
Amazing.
But they'll be having discussions about healthy sexuality, about healthy relationships, about healthily and constructively engaging in your church participation, raising children in healthy ways. These are amazing retreats. Dan's going to be heavily involved in this, and we're going to have more of these in the months and years ahead. So consider that, and we'll put up a URL soon as to how to register. But I'm super excited about that, and I just wanted to let you know that that's coming. So I'll do just a really brief introduction about what this event is about, and then we'll turn it over to the panel. I just want to thank you all for coming. And the background of this is just kind of interesting. Some of you who have been tuning into Mormon Stories for a while know that I've interviewed Dan a couple times, and the most recent interview I did with Dan was sort of us going to toe-to-toe a little bit in terms of me sort of having struggled with leaving or being kicked out of the church, and Dan sort of resolutely sticking in his position of supporting people constructively engaging. And that was a bit of a slugfest in a polite way, I'd say. At least that's how I might characterize it. But that's actually not what today is about. Of course, when I was trying to stay constructively engaged with the church, I started a website called staylds.com. That's still very much going strong. There's a real thriving support community there of people trying to remain constructively engaged. And, I also, we in the foundation started, Mormon Matters. I invited Dan to start that podcast, and then also very proud that we brought Gina on to reboot A Thoughtful Faith. But in the Open Stories Foundation, we basically want to try and support people anywhere outside of just Mormon orthodoxy. So the church does a really great job of supporting those who are Orthodox, and pretty much everybody else is kind of left to figure things out in some ways for themselves. And so while I was a real champion of staying in the church, there obviously became a point where I couldn't champion that anymore. And maybe at times I felt even conflicted about championing that, and even sometimes felt angry and wanted to burn it all down. And so, I said that jokingly, that was a joke. But I've been curious to see how those things would continue. And I've been really impressed with how Dan has continued to grow his audience at Mormon Matters. A Thoughtful Faith started strong with Sarah and Micah, but it kind of fell down a bit. But then Gina picked it right back up, and I think A Thoughtful Faith is one of the most interesting podcasts in Mormonism right now. I think Gina's brilliant. And then, you got some applause for Gina and Dan. In addition, there is I hope Jerry doesn't mind, there is a Facebook forum that is dedicated to supporting people who want to thoughtfully engage with the church. It's not for post-Mormons, it's not for people who want to vent or be angry, but if there are people who are trying to sincerely remain faithfully engaged with the church, this A Thoughtful Faith group has grown to about 2,500 people. It's highly moderated. You have to fill out an application to join it, but they've done amazing things in that group. How many of you are sort of either members of the A Thoughtful Faith group or listeners to Dan or Gina? Raise your hand. All right, lots of friends in the audience.
Yay.
So as those things have continued to come on the scenes and thrive, I see it as a worthy movement within Mormonism, something that definitely is helping a lot of people and is gaining a lot of traction. In addition to that, I had the pleasure of meeting Thomas McConkie a couple years ago. He just reached out to me, and we had a little thing at Starbucks. I don't know if he drank coffee. I don't even know if I was drinking coffee at that point, but we certainly had a delightful meeting. And within a year or two of that meeting, Thomas came out with a really great book called
Navigating Mormon Faith Crisis.
Navigating Mormon Faith Crisis. And Thomas brings a really interesting developmental approach to this whole thing. And his book has really had a lot of traction with a lot of people. And Thomas himself as a speaker has garnered a lot of interest. So Gina was in town, and I just had this bolt of lightning that said, let's get these cool cats together and have a discussion about what they're doing, why it's important, and what it means to people. And at the end, we'll have some questions to kind of, to kind of try and understand better. If any of you have compliments or concerns or questions, you can save them for the end. But without any further ado, I would like to present to you our distinguished panel, Dr. Gina Colvin, Dr. Dan Wotherspoo, and Thomas McConkie.
Nice to be with you guys.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, John.
Super exciting. All right, well, we have a real full house, and this is a really exciting audience. You have a lot of fans here. I wanted to begin by having each of you just briefly talk about a little bit about your background that led to wanting to carve out an alternative approach. So, Gina, we've done an extensive interview with you on Mormon Stories, Dan with you quite a bit as well. But for those in our audience who may not know a little bit about your history, just talk specifically about what led you from, if you were in an Orthodox place, what led you from that to actually wanting to carve out this, some might say, middle way. Gina, why don't we start with you, because ladies first.
Oh, well, thank you very much. That's very kind of you to put me in the hot seat first. And can I just say, it is not, it hasn't gone beyond my attention that I'm one of one woman and three males, and which reminds me a little bit about going to a Temple Recommend interview a couple of years ago. I'd been corralled into it by my state president, whose job I think it was to get everybody to go to the temple, and I was sort of a little reluctant. And I went in there with all guns blazing, and I said, "You know what this feels like? This feels like a pap smear test." At which point, he very quickly went through the questions. He didn't want to probe too deeply. And if he ever watches this, I still love you, Jared.
Prostate exam or
Right,
something.
yes.
No.
Do you know what? I actually think that a more nuanced Mormonism sort of found me. And we can get into that a little bit later. I sort of opened myself to the possibility that I was seeing Mormonism in a particular way, which wasn't healthy for me, regardless of whether or not it was true. And then I just sort of like opened myself to the possibility that there was much more there for me to rest my spirituality in. And I need to say that my desire to spiritually flourish underscores absolutely everything. So, and it was a big surprise to me that I was able to do that in Mormonism.
And what about specifically your willingness to occupy a role as a spokesperson or an advocate for an unorthodox approach? What was it that kind of put you on that trajectory, that path?
You did. It was a PM message.
I guess that's true, huh?
Yes. I mean, originally I began blogging, and I began blogging.
Tell us your blog.
Yeah, Kiwi Mormon. And I did that because I kind of wanted to tell my story. I didn't care if I had readers. It was just I wanted to just carve out a place which I felt was authentic. That was me.
She's a brilliant writer. Have you guys read Kiwi Mormon? Brilliant, yeah.
So I don't know that I want to be a spokesperson, but I feel so passionate about everybody's story that becoming a podcast host meant that I could pour some love into other people's stories. And I think the difference in everybody's stories is what makes the story of Mormonism.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Dan, tell us a little bit about your journey.
Well, as far as, I have a philosophy undergraduate degree, and so I've always been big picture oriented, sort of, oh, you're not looking at me. Sort of oriented to the big questions. I didn't mind tension. I didn't mind, things not being super clear. I enjoyed the dialectic. But then I decided to go on and get a master's in religious studies. And I was able to see these theories of religion for that first semester and kind of keep them at an arm distance. The explanatory power that's kind of there in social, sociology and religion, and psychology and religion, and feminism and religion, and all these fields of study out there. And I was able to sort of not let my Mormonism get affected by those. But then I took a class during my second semester, and it was on Scripture, and specifically the New Testament. And somehow or other, as brilliant as I was already, I still kind of considered Scripture this protected class of stuff. These writings that somehow God really did break through in a unique way in the Western, canon and things like that. And a study about, the humans involved and all the forces that are going on there and all the different things behind it was, crisis in some ways. But it also, it started to feel good enough, and then guess what? All those other questions I'd kept at bay, and now I have to ask those questions about Mormonism, Mormon scripture, as well as everything else. But the beauty of that journey for me ultimately was, and it took me 6 or 7 years to fully embrace this, was I love these world religions I'm studying. Every one of them is fantastic. And at some point early on in the game, I started to simply say, I don't care if they're true or not. They're good and they're wonderful and they frame lives and they ask interesting questions of the universe, and people, kind of make their way through these. And I was finally able to totally relax and say, my religion is one of those, instead of having to be the true one of all those different things. And so I think more than anything, my journey, when I came to peace, was we have a great religion among other religions in the world, and all the things that I saw that I admired there, they're here, even though we have a very more top-down organization than almost any other religion, right, Thomas? And it's hidden, but it was just fun to sit in there and do it. But the crisis came just through schooling and more questions, yeah.
And I believe I met you around 2004, right, as I was trying to orient myself towards the universe.
And that's the thing. I thought I was going to be a college teacher, and I ended up heading up Sunstone, and that's where John and I first.
And even at that point, I knew that you kind of had this shadow stake president sort of role or bishop role of counseling people. But even then, I wasn't exactly sure how solid you were in your resoluteness to sort of make Mormonism work. And I almost remember you saying at one point that you might kind of take a sabbatical at some point and disengage. Now, I'm not saying that's true. It's just kind of what my memory is. But did you always have it in your mind that you would sort of move into this space of almost being a champion for this kind of movement, or did it grow, or?
Yeah, and I don't still wear that very well.
You what?
I don't wear it.
We don't wear what?
I don't wear this champion or even this public role that well. Like I said, I was a very skilled college professor type thing, adjunct, everywhere,
It's just a tough field. Religious studies is
and then all of a sudden, and I'd been speaking at Sunstone Symposiums, and all of a sudden Elbert Peck decided to step down, and I'll apply, and the next thing I know, I discover that instead of an academic voice, and I was always kind of interested in religion at the level of public discourse, so get it out of the jargon, endless, where does the tire meet the road anyway? So the Sunstone gig came along, and then I realized within that first 6 months how pastoral it really was. I'm producing a magazine, we're putting out symposiums and things like that, but it's the phone calls, and it's the emails that, all of us receive now that really was a big aspect of it. But in terms of honestly, I thought Sunstone was kind of a big platform, maybe 10,000 people either read or, were kind of in it. Nothing compared to podcasts. So John kind of saw the wave, and we even did a Sunstone podcast for a few episodes. And then I kind of, too many dang things to do in that job. But I'm grateful for you putting me back into it, even though I'll say one other thing. I was blessed in that first year of real struggle to meet a fellow who served as a mentor for me still to this day. Is Randy Paul. Some of you have met him on my podcast or something like that. He introduced me to Eugene England through his writings, to dialogue, to Sunstone and stuff like that. And here at this moment when I'm thinking, dang, my religion is failing me. It must be the worst religion in the world, just because my parents suck. They're the worst parents in the world. There's that kind of attitude. I saw people engaging it in this way, and there was just subconsciously a piece that Randy had just as 10 years ahead of me on the path. Looking at Gene England and stuff like that, that just kind of were always there as lights to me when things got worse, that somehow or other there's a piece on the other side of the mess. I think I've been mostly on the other side of the mess for, a good 8 or 10 years now, or longer. But there's no going around it. I'm a champion of going through it. And if we serve that role, great, but we're going to fail you too. So
you're reluctant.
I'm reluctant, here, but on the other hand, I'm paying it forward too, in some ways, to those guys.
Thank you. Thomas, so just really quickly, what is your relation to the McConkies that we all know?
My granddad is Oscar. So
Okay.
he founded the law firm downtown with Bill Curtin.
Okay.
He's Bruce's youngest brother.
Okay.
So that's where that's where I fall on the McConkie side.
So Bruce R. would be your
great-uncle.
Your great uncle.
Yep.
Okay. Since many of us don't know much about your background, talk a bit about your upbringing in the church and your journey out and in.
Yeah. I was raised in the Mormon church. And it was about age 13 where I really relate to what you said, Gina, that the faith crisis, the shift in identity really found me. I think at age 13, I was way too young to go theologizing or philosophizing about what Mormonism means and if it was for me. But I knew just on a gut level that something was wrong. And I kind of expressed that to the family. And I still remember this moment when I was 13 years old. It was the first time the thought had ever occurred to me, and it felt like an alien thought just floating through the ether. And it was, what if you don't go to church today? And I had never had that thought in my life. It was an unthinkable thought in my family culture. And I knew it right when I had it, that no one had ever had this thought as a McConkie, let alone acted on it. And I remember that day I didn't go to church, and I had never seen my parents so upset. And I am unusually stubborn. And so when I saw the reaction in the family, that actually really piqued my curiosity. I thought, what if I take another step in that direction? How deep does this go? And, I just happened into it. But after the falling out when I was a young teenager, it just put me on a new path, which is a whole other story.
So you disengaged for how long?
About 20 years.
You were out of the church for 20 years. Okay.
Give or take, yeah. I like to be thorough when I go down a rabbit hole and make sure
So you didn't serve a mission?
I didn't.
Didn't serve a mission?
No.
Ever got married, temple married? No?
No.
Okay. And did you go through periods of trying other religions, atheism,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, backing up to, you touched on a couple important things there. No mission, no marriage. It means as a man in the LDS culture, I missed every major rite of passage that we've produced as a culture. And, there was a long time where I wondered if I even existed. It was such a bizarre kind of twilight zone existence for me that I thought, well, China seems nice. Maybe I'll move there. It's got to be better than what's going on here in Salt Lake. So I really did move across to the other side of the world and just tried to distance myself from it all, right? But in the meantime, I left the church when I was 13, and it was just a few years later before I, found my way to the Kanzeon Zen Center in Salt Lake City. So I started my Buddhist studies and practice when I was still a teenager. And that's been really formative. That's really changed who I am, and it's changed the way I've come to re-engage Mormonism.
So Buddhism do you identify as a Buddhist, or
No.
you kind of Buddhists probably would avoid any labels because that's part of Buddhism, right?
A good Buddhist, an
good
Orthodox Buddhist. No, no, some do. I think I just always felt really Mormon. I just knew intuitively that family lineage, karma, my own identity. I always say this about Mormonism, that it feels like my native tongue. It just feels like the most natural way to express myself, in the vein of worship and devotion. And, it's never felt better, frankly.
Yeah. Are you talking about Buddhism or Mormonism?
Mormonism.
Okay.
Right? See?
But you're bringing your Buddhism into your Mormonism, right?
Yeah,
It's like chocolate and peanut butter. It's like they go better together. True?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I can't imagine leaving behind my Buddhist sensibilities at this point. It's really enriched my life of faith. And, at the end of the day, I think you two would appreciate this, but what I've come to find is that we come to talk a certain way in a given culture, and we wear certain clothes and we do certain dances, but Buddhism really helped me kind of get beneath those surface structures of religion and tap into something that seemed to be generating it. That sounds kind of esoteric, but all I mean to say is that going to the source of Buddhism took me right to the heart of Mormonism. And at that point, it's like, well, flip a coin. Like, I just love the devotion and the worship and the reality of who we are. So let's get excited about who we are and who we're becoming, and maybe worry less about the dividing lines of how we talk about it.
And not just Mormonism, but Christianity too. A lot of Buddhism in Christianity. Real quick, were you estranged from your family for all those years? Was there a point where they just accepted you and you were welcome in their graces as a non-member or a non-believer? Like, how was your relationship with your immediate and extended McConkie family during that time of being out?
Yeah, I was really grief-stricken for years. I mean, from age 13 to 18 when I was still in the home, and just this walking anomaly of an inactive Worthland McConkie son. There's just no place for me. It was really challenging for all of us. And we lived that way. We just tried to coexist for about 15 years that way. It was really painful for all of us. And I had a major turning point. I'd lived with...
Wait, so 15 years of pain and
15 years of
alienation,
estrangement.
struggle,
Yeah, it was
almost no talking, distance.
Little talking, distance. Yeah, and living all around the world, trying not to
stay
feel
away.
how I felt when I was here at home.
Yeah.
Or what should have been home. It was so painful. And I had a turning point in my later 20s. It was this kind of moment that came all at once, just as a grace. But I realized that I had felt so much anger and resentment towards my family, towards the culture, for not being able to just take me as I was. That this is my life and this is how it's unfolding, and there's a mystery to it. I don't understand it either, but would you please just love it? And I realized in just this moment of, a lightning strike that I was actually the one who couldn't accept their Mormonism that didn't accept me. I realized that I was my biggest problem, right? And at that point, my heart just broke open again, and I realized...
Wait, you were the one who couldn't accept their Mormonism?
The Mormonism that didn't accept me.
Right. So you were being as non-accepting as they were to you.
Exactly. And the moment I saw that irony, my heart opened. And that was my entry back into Mormonism. I thought, well, if Mormonism is just forgiveness and letting people be what they are and supporting them in their faith journeys, then I could sign up for that.
So you kind of simplified Mormonism in your mind a little bit, right?
Well, that was part of it.
But you also, it sounds like you decided that you were going to let go of the same judgment that was being directed towards you, and that you were going to work to build bridges, not break down bridges. Is that right?
Absolutely. And everything shifted. When I could let go of that, my own heartache, I was able to come home again.
So that was 5 years ago?
That was I was around 27. That was 8-9 years ago. But that was the beginning of my return. And then it was a long process of reacclimating to the 3-hour block, and that took several years. That was a bitter pill, John.
Was there ever a point where there might be some people in this audience who aren't big fans of your uncle, great uncle, is that?
Bruce?
Bruce, yeah. He's your what?
Great uncle.
I'm not sure what you mean.
What's his relation to you again? You say
My great uncle. My uncle.
Yeah. I think there's probably a lot of people here, maybe even myself included, who feel like in some ways he really damaged some really positive trajectories the church was on, along with Joseph Fielding Smith and others. But was there ever a point where you realized maybe some of the more negative ways that he might have impacted Mormonism and carried maybe regret or shame in that family name, or anger or whatever?
Yeah, no, that's a fair question. I grew up in a family culture. Any family you grow up in struggles. We all have our unique pathologies and the things we struggle with within our own nuclear families. And my family grew up with struggles, and in many ways they bore the pattern of some of Bruce's struggles, right? I think in some ways, and I want to be fair here, but I think sometimes Bruce could be rigid, right? Let me just see how that does with the crowd before.
Shocking
Shocking
insight.
Bruce felt strongly about things, and I grew up in a house, with parents that felt really strongly about things, and that culture felt rigid to me. It was hard for me to live and to flourish that way. So certainly from a young age, even before I knew where it was coming from, I had a sense that we feel pretty tightly wound in this family culture. And the flip side of that is that the older I get, the more I appreciate, that Bruce had his own ministry. And I think the moment where he served in the church and, really created a firm bedrock of doctrine, and this is who we are. Its time has passed, arguably, but there was a time in the church where it was going global, and we needed to cement our identity, as a global organization. So I've come to experience Bruce in a more nuanced way, and I appreciate who he was and that he was on his own path as well. I'll let you, have a breath with that.
Very generous.
Deep breath.
In all fairness,
Me too, John.
in all fairness, that was like 15 years of therapy it took me to get to that. So if you're not there yet, it's cool. You give it time.
I'll make an appointment with you. All right. Yeah. Good. Okay. So was there some like prodigal son return where like the whole immediate and extended? I mean, every one of us, if we stray, wants to be the prodigal child to return and to be celebrated and to kill the fatted lamb or whatever in the feast, right? I mean, certainly there were familial, social, even psychological pressures or gravity to have you come back and be the triumphant sort of returning son.
Yeah. Is that how you were received, and is that how you're sort of viewed now?
Well, it's interesting. I was gone for so long. I missed all the rites of passage. Most of my closest friends, if anything, they think it's strange that I have gone back to church rather than encouraged me to, right? There wasn't any obvious incentive to come back, and I had grown up estranged from my family. So on some level, I think I'd really made peace with that. I think in theory, I could have lived out the rest of my life not engaging with the church, and I certainly didn't have a conscious intent to, right? But I just, like I said, I was a devoted Buddhist practitioner, and every way I knew how, I plumbed the depths of that tradition, and literally in an instant, I kind of woke up and found myself at the heart of Mormonism. It just happened, and it felt really natural, and I celebrate it, understanding that this is maybe one of the most problematic times in Mormon history to come back. But, the last thing I wanted to say is that it was funny. My parents hoped and prayed that I would come back over the years, and I think their first reaction when I actually did start to, come back into the fold, they were confused that I was still so Buddhist. I think they imagined that something fundamentally would change, and I seek to integrate it all. I don't want to leave any of the good stuff behind, and I think Mormonism on its good days does that. It just doesn't leave anything good behind.
Okay.
So, but did they celebrate you? Did they celebrate your return?
I think they're getting used to it.
Okay. All right. All right. So, Dan or Gina, I'm not sure. Maybe both of you can speak to this, and Thomas, feel free to jump in. I fell in love with Chaim Potok at BYU. My name is Asher Lev, and since I've read 3 other Chaim Potok books, Chaim Potok was this author in the, 70s, 80s, who wrote a lot about how Judaism sort of went from Orthodox, sort of Hasidic, very conservative traditions, and he traces in many of his books how modern strains of liberalism and progressivism transformed Judaism as it struggled to face historical criticism of the Old Testament, as Jews faced the Holocaust and sort of century after century of persecution, and how the social strains within Judaism led to multiple branches of Judaism, but one branch in particular, Reform Judaism, but also Reconstructionist Judaism, that today represents the largest branch of Judaism in the United States. And it happens to be a branch of Judaism where believing in God is optional. Believing in Moses, the founder of your religion, is optional. And you can be a female rabbi, you can be a gay or lesbian rabbi, you can be a transgender rabbi. And it's super broad and progressive and inclusive, and also it's more about the ritual and finding community and even spiritual value and enlightenment within the tradition, and basically saying you don't have to choose between truth and science and knowledge, and your heritage, your traditions, and even spirituality and religiosity. And, for many, many years, I was trying to see, could we carve this out within Mormonism? Yes, no. If we can't, can we create sort of a reform Mormonism? And that's had its big, long history in terms of how I've been thinking about things. But Dan and Gina, have you guys thought about the way that history is unfolded in other religious traditions and the extent to which this is sort of our time to go through these growing pains? So sort of the historical context that we find ourselves in relative to other developmental trajectories of other religions, of other religious traditions. Do you see this as that moment for us, and is that in any way what fuels what you're doing? A vision for what we can become in that same light? That's a really long question.
It was a really long question.
Yeah.
And I want to take issue, not issue, but question the idea of we, because I think there is a little bit of a conceit here to suggest that in Mormonism there is one we. So I grew up in New Zealand, and the way that I experienced Mormonism was markedly different than perhaps you had experienced Mormonism here in Salt Lake City. And so I suppose I have always bucked at the notion of a kind of a Mormon cultural imperialism imprinting itself on the way that we managed Mormonism here in New Zealand, where it was always a very syncretic tradition. It beautifully fused Maori spiritual practice with this, this audacious American religious practice, and held those two spaces really well, right up until about the 1970s, where correlation meant that there was an impinging in the expression of indigenous realization of Mormonism, or expressions of Mormonism. So I think that's, and this largely happened during the Maori Renaissance. And I say, I think you guys say Maori or something like that. It's actually pronounced properly Maori. And we found a lot of that flexibility to express both our culture and our religious tradition curtailed by visiting authorities who would say, well, we don't want you to speak the Maori language anymore. You all speak English, so you can just stop that. Or the death rituals in which you can't hold that at the meeting house anymore. For 3 days, you need to bring bodies to the chapel, and you can have it in a one day, reminiscent of whatever happens here in your mortuaries and your funeral homes. And so there was a huge divide between this very white American Wasatch Front culture and an effort to wash out the nativeness, the indigeneity of that. So in terms of responding to the question about religious traditions, this moment, I think, asks us to pay attention to the way in which Mormonism is expressed right throughout the world in its different iterations, the way it wraps around and nourishes indigenous or other cultures. I mean, growing up, I always experienced these American authorities. And I grew up in a gorgeous, gorgeous area of the church where people were so loving. I mean, I'm a bastard child of a single mother, and they just enveloped, and I think we've already had that discussion, they just housed me and nurtured me and loved me, and they still do. And so when I experienced that against this very sort of Americentric, I think I may have made up that word, but I used it a lot, yeah. This very American way of, and the Americans would come and they had these big friggin' white teeth, and they'd stand at the podium with this kind of audacious confidence. They were like large flickering televisions, and I didn't like the effect that had on the people that I loved. They became smaller in those spaces, and that really pissed me off growing up. And I noticed it very young as well. So, back to your question. Sorry, this is taking a long time, Dan.
That's important. That's important stuff. Thank you for...
Yeah. So, in terms of the moment that we have, I think that Mormonism's breath is realized at the periphery, both at the periphery of the church and also in its shadows. We make a lot, I think, of Mormonism and writ large, or I suppose corporate Mormonism, wants to celebrate the light, but no religious tradition happens in just light. It happens in light and shadow. It happens at center and periphery. And I don't think we've reconciled the light and the shadow of Mormonism. These kinds of conversations may be monitored as something other to the people over that direction. Is it that direction?
Let's see.
Temple
Yeah,
Square?
right, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
that way.
I was right.
That way, yeah.
So and I think the great conversation needs to bring the shadow. I mean, in many respects, we're shadow workers doing religion and spirituality in this sort of bardo space, this threshold space. When Mormonism can reconcile what's happening at the center with what's happening at the periphery, with what's happening in the shadows, with what they would like to see in the light, then I think that we've got a healthier Mormonism. I don't know if that really answered your question, but that's what came up.
No, it's important. So am I hearing you say that there never has been just one Mormonism?
No.
Ever?
And you've seen, and there's been lots of resistance.
And there's always been a tension, sort of dialectical tensions
Yes.
within our tradition.
Yes.
And it's always been so.
I think so. Yeah,
So there's not
absolutely.
this single monolithic Mormonism moving in progression. And there's a lot of people here who feel like there has been. They were raised in a correlated mindset where they felt like there was a single Mormonism. And you guys represent something other than Mormonism. They're like, you guys are making this up. There's a lot of people here who just say, you guys are making up your own thing. It's not even Mormon. It doesn't even sound Mormon. Mm-hmm. And you're basically challenging even the premise of the question, saying it's always been a messy, sort of fringy dialectic of a progression.
Absolutely.
Okay. Dan, what would be your answer to my really long question in addition to
Well,
what Gina
there's
said?
different parts to it, and I know that Thomas has some really good stuff because of previous conversations on, I think he thinks we're at a great moment now for a developmental shift and things. But something came up for me in the question, so I'm just going to go with it. And it's a story I haven't told in a long time. I did write about it once. It was just the trigger of an Orthodox Jewish woman and the role that she played in my life. And where I'm going with this, I'm taking the part of your question like, does this idea of a Reformed Mormonism or some kind of, even labels like progressive Mormon, does this occupy my brain? Am I trying to create something? So that's kind of the part of the question I'm going to do. Well, what happened in 1997, I was at the American Academy of Religion, and I was trying to get a job and all that kind of good stuff. But I was teaching, and I had a student that was going to be writing about cloning. And so I just went to a session on cloning at this thing just to kind of educate myself so I could engage his paper better at the end. And there was a revelation that happened in the way an Orthodox Jewish woman spoke, who was also a scholar. So it was like in this embodiment of a woman that had the full brain power and the articulateness and this brilliance and the ease at which she spoke about her own religious tradition. And I don't remember exactly the arguments who she was making, but as she talked about cloning, she really kind of talked about the Jewish nature of the body, and she got into burial and preparation for burial rituals and things like that. And it was just this amazing moment for me to look at somebody who had both things going on, but she wore them so much well. And so here I graduate in 96, write my dissertation. I'm in my second year of trying to do a cycle. And you're at the academy, and I wrote a Mormon dissertation. And people are like, hey, what do you study? What's your thing? And I go, well, I did a dissertation on Mormon theology, or something like that. And I would introduce myself as a Mormon, but I always say, but don't worry, I'm a liberal Mormon, or I'm a progressive Mormon, or I'm, I also hate Tom Green. I don't know if you remember the polygamous Tom Green. He was like really conspicuous there in the 90s in my head, and Orrin Hatch was doing crazy things, and I always was putting a but. I'm a Mormon but. And it was so interesting. I just had one of those like moments to reflect on this when I was just like out of body kind of noticing. The very next session I attended to after that, somebody and I started a conversation, and she just said, so what's your field of study? I go, I'm a Mormon theologian. And I just left it right there. And from that point on, my goal has just been to say, I'm a Mormon, you're a Mormon, everyone here is a Mormon. I don't love these labels. I see them as necessary evils right now. But you know, there's generally no one questions that a contemplative Catholic is a Catholic. You know, no one questions any of the forms of Judaism as Jews. That's my goal to you know, if anything. So I'm really not trying to create a particular brand here. I'm just trying to let everyone know that whatever you are, speak it. And let them do the work of, oh, well, he certainly doesn't sound like the normal Mormons that I run into. Let them do the work instead of giving them the easy answer. So at least that part of your question, that's what I addressed.
So am I a Mormon?
Everyone who claims it is Mormon, for me. Yeah, I really, you know, I'm a part of this workshop and we're calling it Progressive Mormons, and you explained partly why we're trying to attach a different crowd than the transitioning out ones. But, you know, ultimately, this is just a question for, you know, healthy living and spirituality and all those kinds of things.
Brilliant. Thomas, did you want to add?
I wanted to ask you if you are a Mormon. I'm interested in that question.
You really are?
Yeah, well, I would love to hear your answer
no,
if you're willing.
I definitely feel culturally Mormon still. I mean, you saw how I sang those primary songs. I mean, that feels like home to me, singing a primary song. I know that makes some people angry when I say that, but it very much feels like home. Having said that, it's almost like a divorce in the sense you'll always be family, but there's also a lot of trauma and problems that made it so you couldn't be together. So I'm a bit conflicted, but in my heart I still feel very Mormon.
Thanks, John. So, well, I'm happy to sing with you tonight.
What's that?
I'm happy to sing with you tonight.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I have a little something, just kind of an image to offer, really. You know, when Gina and Dan were both talking about how Mormonism is growing, how it's changing in their own person, but also as an organization and the community, I think about the Big Bang. You know, the story we tell in science, like there was nothing, and then there was a whole lot of something, right? And, you know, everything that proceeded from the nothing was part of the bang. Right, it's all made of the same universal substance, right, at its core, right? It's light energy, Einstein would say, right? And there's something beautiful about what I hear in your voices, like if we just claim our experience, like if we're in the Mormon orbit, if we're part of the Mormon Big Bang, and this Mormonism is screaming out into the edges of space, then everything from that bang is Mormon. Every experience we have is some kind of Mormonism, and there's a real dignity in that, and there's an incredible value in that. And I got chills when you just said that, Dan, like I'm a Mormon theologian. And like that, to me, that is evolution. And sometimes evolution is synonymous with restoration, right? It just muddles along, it's messy, but it's happening, and we're growing into these new categories that we haven't seen before, and we don't even know what to call them yet. We're evolving a new language for it. But I think what really excites me is that in the structure of Mormonism and the theology itself, we're actually invited to create those new structures. We're invited to deeply participate in the restoration. So I think it's a beautiful invitation, and there are worse places and religions to be born into.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, you have a hopefulness for this moment, too. I'd love to at least prompt you to talk about that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you want to go somewhere else?
Quick answer.
Why am I hopeful?
Do you see this as a historic moment or a pivotal moment or at a crossroads, you know, a great opportunity? Do you have a framing of the moment?
Well, I mean, this is where I love the Buddhist framing. I mean, in Buddhism, we talk about every moment as potentially being the moment where we wake up to our own nature. And I think there's definitely a quickening in the Mormon culture, just our ability to come into community together, our ability to communicate with one another. It feels like there's a quickening. And, you know, every single moment, including and especially this one, why shouldn't it be a turning point in history?
Okay. It's very Buddhist. So for many of us, and Gina, this is maybe a different experience than your beautiful experience. For many of us, in our minds, there really is one Mormonism. And it's the corporate correlated 15, apostles and prophets that lead us, and they tell us what doctrine is. They've got the authority, and from their perspective, our job is to, and this is let's just say in the post-Mormon world, the pejorative is pay, pray, and obey, right? Pay your tithing, worship, and do what we say. And so for many who let's just say emerge or fall out of or awaken from Mormon orthodoxy, they just, first of all, they don't even see sticking around as a possibility once they decide that it's not what it claims to be and may even be false or other sorts of things. And also they sort of say the church is what the brethren say it is, and they don't want people like us, and we're not doing Mormonism like they say we should be doing Mormonism, therefore we should leave Mormonism. And Thomas, we'll start with you, and then Dan, and then Gina. What would you respond? There are many people. How many of you in this audience sort of feel that way or have experienced that? Okay. What would you say to someone who said to you, you can't do your own Mormonism, you do what the brethren say, and that's Mormonism?
Right. Yeah, this is a painful question, because I know from personal experience, and I'm sure there are more people than indicated in the room, that carry this pain of feeling like there's no category for them, and they can shoehorn themselves into a proper category of Mormonism, or they can get out. And that's a terrible choice to make. Again, I would just refer back to my own personal experience with it. I find a really powerful practice of forgiveness in noticing the way that some Mormons can't include me, and making my Mormonism a matter of including them, right? I mean, I've said this in past conversations, and I continue to say it, that, in a sense, there's the church that you're talking about. I don't disagree with that at all. And what's the church without all of us? It's a bunch of books that aren't getting read and a bunch of buildings that aren't getting filled. We are the church. Like, what's the church if it's not the aggregate of the members? And so if we can live into new realities, and if we can tell new stories about Mormonism, how could the church do anything but change and become something new? So I'm optimistic about the power of the individual and the power of community in dreaming a new kind of Mormonism that is the kind of world we want to be in, Yeah.
Dan?
Yeah. I am living as a Mormon, active, teaching priesthood, participating, being welcomed and valued by people around me, and every single one of them. My wife and I marched at the Pride Parade, recently, and they know who we are, and we share openly. I'm a kind of a frequent flyer at testimony meeting these days, and it's never about truth claims so much as experiential goodness and gratefulness. When my daughter got married, I was just so grateful for all the forces that raised this child that has had to express those kinds of things. So that's my kind of testimony and my gratitude. But I am living this life. But 1989 is when I started. What are we now? 27 years later. And after 10 or 11 years of hell, of negotiating that exact terrain of, wow, the culture versus me, little old me, and it just took growing confidence in myself, my own connection with God and Spirit. I had a fantastic mission, but late in life, 24 years old when I went, well, a couple months shy of it. Powerful spiritual experiences that kind of taught me how God and I work together, kind of how to hear the voice and things like that. And so that when I'm struggling, I'm grateful that I had at least, I know what that feels like, but I was unable to stand being in church half the time. There was a 4-year period when it was maybe 1 out of 3 weeks that I could stand to go, and I'd come home madder than when I left, and my wife would support me in this. And there was a couple of years where I was a member of the First Unitarian congregation in the morning and, doing my thing in the afternoon. But luckily I had a guy like Tom Rogers who was in my ward, and I became friends with him. And, just at the right time, mentors and models of how to kind of, be this were always there and felt authentic to me. So I'm just, again, more of a, if anything, if you're feeling that way now, I felt that way, Grateful for Randy Paul, just like, take the long view, Grateful for the voices I have. And so if the podcasts and if the Facebook groups and all those things are serving that for you, they served that for me in different, just a different earlier iterations of that. But this is a powerful journey to be on. It's the human journey, I really do believe, to move from other people's authority to your own authority, your own connection. Any theology, any claim, that's weighed now against this entirety of my own sitting in spirit and my own weighing and all those different things. And so I'm perfectly comfortable in my Mormon skin, and I'm perfectly comfortable at church. I'm sad a lot. I'm sad that there's not greater depth of discussion, and I do my part on the weeks that I can kind of work something in, to kind of say, let's shift this to a different plane. But I can do it, and I know it can be done, but it took a dozen years to even be close to not.
So you're saying it takes time?
Yeah, and and you live into it. I wish there were the top 10 things I could do, and within 6 months I've mastered this. But Thomas and I both kind of know, and just from studying all the faith development theories out there in the world, it's a whole reorientation. And one of the big shifts is, and it doesn't sound possible, from what you believe becoming just less and less and less important to just, for me, my words are from belief to centering, just to feel centered in the universe, to feel comfortable in my own skin, all those kinds of things. Then beliefs are just interesting, and some lead to better experiential things, and some lead away from it and things like that. But there's not a single Mormon claim that I believe literally. But boy, the gist of them, the sensibility of them, there's lots of those that I say, these are expansive and ennobling, and that's where I sit. And then I can usually take something that's lousy in church and go, what's the deeper thing there? As soon as you start talking about it, everyone goes, oh yeah, that's Mormonism too. We just haven't talked about that in a while. But anyway, I ran on too long.
Thank you.
But thanks.
Gina.
So your question is whether or not it's possible for us to occupy these more nuanced positions. Yes. Just try and stop me.
Nice.
What I realized some time ago is that the church is weighed down by the dead weight of semen. And
Somebody tweet that. The church is weighed down by the dead weight of semen.
yes.
Tweet that.
There's
Somebody.
going to be a meme
Tag
tomorrow,
Gina
right?
Kiwi Mormon. What's your
And
Twitter
semen
tag?
is fine in
What?
certain contexts. But not in a spiritual context. And I think the great thing, that the great moment that we're waiting for, and it will only come, it will only be realized. I'm sorry, I'm filthy. I'm just filthy.
So maybe there'll be a climax to this
yes,
journey?
there will be a climax.
Do we need some Barry White here?
Yeah. I think, I don't know, I just need to kind of run through my glossary of words, my thesaurus.
You're making it hard, Gina.
Oh, man.
My sense is that...
I'm sorry.
Thomas, you want to at least get one in? No,
Thomas is
I'm
staying above
that
the
frame.
frame.
My sense is that unless we claim, particularly women, claim all that Mormonism has and continues to offer us, that is not offered formally, but is there, our church will putter along in this sort of wasteland of evolution, waiting for the brethren to do something. Now, unless we women wake up to the extraordinary power that we have, and we demand a sex balance, I think that the church will just putter out. It'll kind of tip over into this sort of, this sort of nihilistic patriarchy. It will become irrelevant. So when we talk about whether or not there is another kind of Mormon, there must be another kind of Mormonism, and that is the Mormonism that is claimed by women without looking for authority. So.
Do I hear you saying woman instead of women?
It might be an accent thing.
What? I'm just.
Might be an accent.
Is that an accent? Okay.
Woman.
Okay. No, I just want to make sure
Man.
if it was a different word choice, I want to understand what was
Woman.
behind it. So.
Woman.
Okay. Perfect. Beautiful. That was beautiful, except we lost the spirit in that exchange right before.
I felt the spirit.
You drove the spirit out. You felt more.
Oh,
you
yes.
felt the spirit more.
A type of spirit.
Okay, really quick. I know you've all communicated that Mormonism, for each of you, is a fertile ground to develop spirituality. There's many people who see it as a spoiled ground, where our history is one of, abuse or deceit, polygamy and abusive, marginalization of women, of hiding things, of punishing people who speak out. And they sort of see it as this war zone of carnage and polluted, sort of a moral Chernobyl. And why would anyone want to build a house there, right? Mm-hmm. How do you guys, each of you, let's do Dan, Gina, Thomas this time, how do each of you decide that in spite of Mountain Meadows Massacre and polyandry and September 6th and just all the different examples of carnage along the road, that you still want to sort of put up shop in the middle of what some think is Chernobyl? Like, why not just be a good person? Why not humanism? Why not just sort of strike out with secularists and build something that isn't tainted by what many view as immoral ugliness? Was that a loaded question? A loaded question. But you can empathize.
Anybody who's heard
So why
John
not just
and I
leave
go
the
out there.
church is what you're asking.
What's that?
Why not leave the church is what you're asking.
No, why try and build a spiritual home in a place that's so fraught?
Oh.
Well, I guess for me, autobiographically, I did build a spiritual home within this environment, so I know it was possible. It's my native language. I've shared, coming back when my life was so broken to the story in the Book of Mormon of the sons of Messiah and Alma the Younger, and just going, that's me. They made something of their lives again after this sort of, trip. So can I. I don't know that they ever lived or breathed or anything like that, but that was a story that felt real to me, at least archetypically. Of course, then I did think that it was for sure literal. So man, Mormonism was a fertile ground for me to say, I'm a person of worth. God loves me. There's nothing I can do. I can change. I can become something again. And of course, there's lots that you have to go through to make those transitions, but Mormonism worked for me. Like I teased at it, so I won't spend a lot of it. When it became to get complicated again for me during the school time, that beauty of seeing Buddhism, Islam, every form of Christianity, Judaism lived at deep levels and surface levels, and people that, unthinkingly do things versus people that are contemplative and stuff like that, and saying every tradition has that. Therefore, that's within my Mormonism. I'm not going to say all of Buddhism is this, because there's people that are really, wanting the prayer flag kind of automatic universe. I don't know. It's been too long, but that's where they're centered in their practice. And so Mormonism always had a bigger spectrum for me, thankfully, because of my study of world religions. as far as the toxic environment versus others, there's a great phrase. It's from a Krista Tippett podcast. If you guys don't listen to Krista Tippett, boy, she is in my top 5 favorite people in the world. Somebody she was interviewing basically said, yeah, I see all the crap. So they say yes, and then their next phrase is and I go about doing my thing to ease that, to acknowledge it. I'm not afraid to notice it there. Carolyn Pearson, talks a lot. She's got the great metaphors about, there's that polygamy tree, and there's those other things, but they're in my backyard too, and I have to wrestle with them and stuff like that. So you don't want to deny that they're there. I don't want to deny the experience of everybody here who's, been damaged. I haven't been damaged personally by Mormonism.
You have or have not?
Not
You have
too
not
much.
been.
Not too much. So again, I know I'm only speaking from my experience about that, but it's, I guess this is one of the few things I came here to express, and if I'm using up all my time now, that's fine. At a certain point, I've just made peace that I'm never going to be living a life where I'm going to seek total victory. You know what I mean? There's sort of good people get in and they fight a fight and they live and they die, and things have changed perhaps in their lifetime and because of their efforts. But that's not a reason for staying or going, and whether or not I'm successful in changing it. I feel called to this life by my own story, my own autobiography, my own temperament. I have this ability to kind of not be, reactive super fast. So whatever it is for me, but there is this beauty. It's a tragic beauty, but there's a beauty in never fully being able to declare victory in this fight that we want. But there are resources for the spiritual renewal. So in other words, it doesn't have to be the external validation. This changed because of efforts. But it's when you know that you're in tune with your highest self or what you're called to do, and you've got that sort of stuff coming together in you, you don't need the external. You've got the internal renewal and those sources and the energy that flows. And so every day, spend some time in those energies. Find those things that speak to your higher self, and I promise you, at least for me now, 10 or 15 years into kind of living at that sort of peace, it's possible, it's enjoyable. I did remember one thing. When Gene England died, Peggy Fletcher Stack called me up and says, who's going to be the next Gene England? And my first thought was, who would want to be? Because it seems so painful to be that misunderstood by so many people and things like that. And yet, as I prepared for a while there, I got the website together for eugeneengland.org, and I did a few things like that. And there was a time when I was probably going to write a biography of him, but that time's passed. But I saw the joy too, and I experienced that joy. So amidst all this pain, amidst all this horrible things, I promise you, I'm not having a non-joyful life. And I really do want to go to church on Sunday because these are good people. Not every life has to be about brilliance and, depth of conversation. I'll take goodness over correctness anytime. Thanks.
What was the question again?
It's about the poison
Why
ground.
try
versus-
and build a spiritual home in what some might describe as kind of a wasteland,
A wasteland.
a fraught wasteland?
I'd have to be convinced that it is a wasteland. And I'm really compelled by the notion, I think it's samsara, isn't it? The Buddhist notion of the burning house. I'm not going to make excuses for Mormonism. For
Which house?
The burning
samsara.
house.
It's the idea that the house is burning.
Oh, right.
It's-
Okay.
And so I can't make any excuses for some of the injuries inflicted upon, the psychic and the spiritual injuries inflicted upon people. And I was having a chat with Christine before, just in case people don't know this about me, but there were times that I would go to church and I would think to myself, if my brains explode and splatter all over the chandeliers, I wouldn't be surprised. There are times that I would show up at church and pull into the car park and I couldn't breathe. And it has been deeply, deeply painful. And as each layer of sort of mythology has been deconstructed before me, I'm thinking this place is a mess. However, having said that, I can't deny the ineffable. I can't deny the goodness that has come my way. You know, I mentioned that, you know, I've had a very complex childhood. And I was claimed at every moment by a member of the Mormon Church. So I was 14 years old, sitting in a prison cell at Christchurch Police Station, wondering what was going to happen to me, and the district president comes along, and he takes me, he says to me, "We want you. We've always loved you, we want you." I'm 16 years old, and my stepfather had a vile, vile temper, and he was just merciless with me. And the stake president's family said, "Come to us. We want you." And there is a generosity that exists in Mormonism that is spectacular. And I have been the beneficiary of a lot of that. So, and I have to say, in all honesty, all of the good things that have happened to me have happened because I'm a Mormon. Some of the worst things that have happened to me because I'm a Mormon. And that's just the terrain. That's just what it is. And if I'm looking for a single story, a story of certainty, a story that is whole in its goodness, then, you know, that's just not life. Sometimes the house is on fire. And I talked about my sabbatical before, about leaving, and that was me leaving the house. And surprisingly, I'm nurtured in the Baptist tradition. You know, for a good year, I think I said it was 6 months I was on my sabbatical, but I lied a little because I'd been sort of going to the Baptist church for about a year, where my spirituality was nurtured, where I was heard. I had wonderful relationships with the ministerial team. My kids loved going. They were like, "Wow, we don't have to wear uniforms here." And so there was just this real sense of recovering my relationship with God, my understanding of the importance of Jesus' life. And then, surprise, surprise, it surprised me that I felt the call to go back to church. And I can't explain it. Just go back. And surprisingly, again, all of those things that bothered me, I felt that claimed me, that claimed my aggression, my hurt, ceased to have the kind of potency that it had once before. Not that I couldn't see it, but I saw a different way. I used to bludgeon people with my fury, and I ruined a lot of relationships in my ward. You know, I'd sit by somebody and say, "Well, did you know City Creek and Tithing Gross Net, da 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 da?" And they had no idea. They were terrorized by me.
Any of you terrorized anybody?
Yeah. And understanding that my relationship with God was much more central than anything else, and that God was calling me to compassion, and He wasn't obligating me to live a life of obedience or to these sort of unwieldy, sort of discursive, sort of priesthood structures. Not that I don't respect some of the men. And I came back really sort of unbound by all of the things that I feared before, and now people are afraid of me, particularly men, which I like. Yes, I enjoy that.
Beautiful. I'm scared of you. If that's
Yeah, you should be.
Beautiful. Thank you, Gina.
Yeah.
Thomas.
Well, one thing I want to say, I was struck again by what you said, Dan. That was it that you haven't been traumatized in the church? You haven't felt that?
Not particularly
Yeah,
myself,
not particularly,
but
right?
my friends and stuff. So
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, when you said that, it struck me that my deepest pain and wounding comes straight from my Mormon experience. Right?
You have been.
If I could point to any single author of the pain in my life, it would be the Mormon Church. And so it makes your question all the more relevant and all the more poignant. And I suspect I'm not alone. I think there are a lot of people like me. There's a pattern I'm seeing that I hope I can articulate, which is that at some point, all of us who are in the Mormon church, there was a point in our lives where it just held us. It held us so well it was basically invisible. It's just the way we did things. It was supporting us. It was growing us. And all the language tonight, or a lot of it, what we hear is like, and then all of a sudden I was really upset about the history, Mountain Meadows Massacre, September 6th, that kind of thing. All of a sudden we're tuned into the historical problems. Or, what on earth happened with that priesthood ban? How could that happen in a church like this that claims divine authority? Or the current, the brutal conflict with the LGBT community right now, and learning how to really include them deeply. We wake up out of the womb. We're born out of this womb that just holds us and nourishes us. And all of a sudden, the bright lights of samsara are burning our eyeballs, and we're saying, how could I have ever stayed in a place like this, right? And we're turning around and looking at the parent and saying, like, how could I possibly stay in a home like this that has been my abuser? And what I just want to point out is that what I see as a part of all of us that is growing into the parent. We're actually leaving behind the role of the child and learning how to be a parent and saying, we can actually take care of the church in its infancy. We can actually find a place in our heart that's bigger than we thought we were, that can include that and love that in all of its shortcomings. So the question to me, it's not so much why would we stick around and build something here with all of the problems? The problems are evident, and I don't make any excuses for them either. But I know in my own experience and my own growth that to include the church, to learn how to love the church, especially the parts I don't want to love, is to grow myself and to actually honor what I can become. And that spiritual birthright is too important for me to give up for anything.
So I find myself feeling like those responses were really wise and poised and brilliant. And I also feel a strong reaction. Just a couple really quick stories to frame the question, because I like long, drawn-out questions.
Shocking.
I remember when I was living in Chicago, I was first starting to become awakened to the plight of LGBT people, and I was trying to talk to my brother-in-law about it, who's a really active, devout, believing member. And I remember him saying something to the point of, yeah, you can spend your life worrying about really obscure populations like, red-headed, freckled midgets. But, then there's the rest of us who have to live day to day, and, I can't bother myself with these sort of obscure minorities. We have to sort of go with where we are and who we're mostly with. And his point was, LGBT people, some small minority, they're almost not that even substantive enough to think about. And then I fast forward to a friend that I had at Utah State University who had been with her partner for, let's just say, 8-9 years. And I mistakenly called her partner her husband, and she said, I'm not married. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, cool. And she said, my partner and I have decided that until marriage is available to everyone in the United States as an act of solidarity, we're not going to partake in it. And so we'll get married as soon as everyone in the United States has the same right. And it was just to say, until we're all welcome, we're not interested in being a part of the franchise. And so to mix another metaphor in, if you look at the way intellectuals have been treated, people excommunicated, if you look at the way women are in some ways held to a second-class status, and people advocating for feminism have been excommunicated. And then you look at sort of the gut punch that was November 2015, where in very real ways, a substantive and important part of our population were basically said, you're not wanted and you're not welcome here. And then you add to that a knowledge about like the suicide epidemic that is in the LGBT community, right? How did those successive sucker punches not just take you out? And how can you see the church metaphorically on the Titanic throwing people off the boat, and yet you're willing to stay on it and enjoy the benefits of membership while so many people have been kicked off? And it sounds like a charged question, but it's really not accusatory.
It really is.
And I'm not even asking you to I'm not even asking you to defend yourself. It's not, you're not on trial here.
Yeah.
I'm saying those must have been sucker punches for you, and I'm guessing they continue to be. And I'm guessing you, of all of us, have deep sympathies for these populations that have been told you're not wanted. How did you make that work for you? And we'll go Gina, Thomas, and Dan.
I think that's a great question, John. It's a question that when Thomas and I did a podcast, I asked him, how do we keep doing Mormonism when showing up seems like an affirmation of the institution when it's so deeply, deeply flawed? And I want to acknowledge my personal feeling about each of those sucker punches. I mean, that was just wounding spiritually, deeply wounding. But, and for me, one of the biggest sucker punches that I received was when Kate Kelly was excommunicated. And Kate Kelly is a friend, and I love her dearly.
And you're on the Ordained Women Board right now.
No, I was
you
on the
were
Ordained Women
recently,
Board.
okay.
Yes. And the reason I say that is that I was at the Action in October 2014. 2014.
14. 13?
Yeah, and I was talking to Joanna, 14, yeah. 14. I was talking to Joanna Brooks, and I said, I'm not sure. I was in San Francisco anyway, and I said, I'm not sure if I want, if I'm going to go, and we sort of debated it, and she convinced me to come. And the minute I said to myself, okay, you're going to go. I mean, I'm not one for big, squishy, sort of fat spiritual experiences. They're sort of a more sort of meandery in me. I was struck with how utterly vital showing up was at that point. It was one of the most extraordinary experiences, and it surprised me, knocked me for a six. That's a cricket term. I'm sorry for those people. Cricket is a game.
Knocked you for a six?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Sorry.
Knocked you for a six.
Well, I have to translate. I was really, really surprised by it. And I was surprised at the depth of feeling at that event. And so when she was excommunicated, it felt so at odds with the spiritual experience that I'd received. And I think a lot of us feel that there is a tension between the way that we experience, the spirituality that we feel in these progressive moments, in these moments of wanting evolution and change for the church, and what the church is doing. Is this still on? Okay. And I met with my stake president after that happened. And, well, he asked to see me. And he just gave me a chance to cry and to weep for that. And because he's a priesthood man, he didn't convey one way or the other about whether or not he felt that Kate should have been excommunicated or not, but I felt waves of empathy for him. And that, at that point, told me that there is a bigger story than just right or wrong, that I could occupy that place in Mormonism because there were enough people, and I was just beset with calls from people, former bishops, who reached out to me and said, I know how you feel about this, and I'm really sorry. And you should know that if I was that woman's bishop, she would not have been excommunicated. That was wrong. And so it wasn't just one story. Like, her excommunication was a million stories shared all over the world. And it just so happened that my spirituality was sustained inside the church. So I don't know if that answers your question, but for me, I didn't experience it as just this monolithic kind of clear black or white, that the greatest spiritual sustenance I got was inside the church. And it continues to be that way.
Yeah. Can you help me understand the question better, John? I'm just trying to feel it.
Yeah.
I feel like I haven't answered it if you don't understand it.
Well, no, it's changing. It's
All right, okay.
a restoration process, this question.
Yeah, I mean, there are important, beautiful, wonderful people who have been told they're not welcome, they're not wanted. And for some, it comes down to a matter of privilege. If you happen to be straight, if you happen to be cisgender, if you happen to be middle class, white, whatever it is, smart enough family connections, sure, you can have your cake and eat it too. You can have the privilege of membership and of affiliation and be the celebrated, prodigal son returned, but in some sense, you're doing that in the face of a lot of people being kicked out and turned away. And how are you not, in some ways, complicit, either by lending your name or your money or your time? Yeah. How are you not complicit in the damage being done by others? And how have you been able to remain a member in the face of that, that position the church has taken with so many people who now don't feel welcome?
Yeah, no, thank you. That really helps. The first thing I want to say is that I just feel the tremendous pain in the question, and I appreciate that you're willing to feel the pain and give voice to the pain. It feels incredibly real to me, and I don't know how I could be participating in this moment in Mormonism without being really honest about the pain that you're speaking to. So I appreciate it. I appreciate how you ask it and how you're willing to feel it. And my answer at the moment is I just don't know. I don't know if going to church makes me complicit in all of that or if it's helping. I hope it's helping. And I don't know if coming here tonight and, gathering the saints and hopefully holding a space where we can grow together and, let go of some pain together and heal and create a brighter future together. I hope that, but I don't know if it will. All I can say is that I bring an attitude of experimentation. Like, I'm willing to take big risks and experiment with, how can we probe the system? How can we make moves to get things going again? I can't be okay in the church. I can't be okay as a Mormon until my LGBT brothers and sisters feel as welcome as I do at church. I just can't. So how we get there, I don't know, but I'm here, I'm throwing everything I have at it, and I love you guys for doing the same, everybody. So.
Just a moderator's pause. I have to say how much I love the answer I don't know. I almost never get it, and I love it. So all things aside, I love that answer.
I don't know.
I think sometimes I don't know
how I did it.
can say so much. So thank you, Thomas.
Thanks, John.
Dan.
Just quickly, 3 things came to mind. I grieved. I grieved till I couldn't, a good 6-8 weeks before I found any kind of zest and optimism again. Gerald Lee, my good friend here, we're moderating a thoughtful faith. We're, 8 hours a day. We're just trying to process all this pain that we're all feeling and all this confusion. And then to me, the double blow was President Nelson, it's a revelation. Because I got enough of a sense of how corporations work and institutions have evil, inadvertent evil, but how they can really dismiss people and do all that stuff. But when, he actually went and said it's a revelation, that was giving me another month. But I'll let you know what happened, helpfully. The thing came out on Thursday. Sunday morning, I'm talking with Carolyn Pearson and Mitch Main on my podcast. Later that week, I put together another one where we're trying to read the tea leaves. So my podcast helped me process out loud. 2 weeks later, we did 4 parts with Bill Bradshaw and Daniel Parkinson, John's cousin, and Natasha Helfer Parker on the sociology and the science and all that stuff about LGBT. So I luckily had a forum in which to talk and to grieve openly as well as to wrestle. So I felt like I was able to still do something good in the world at the same time that I was grieving. So I was really, really grateful for that. But, again, I really can't say enough about the saving practice of something every day where you and God are alone, or you and the universe, or whatever it is, are alone every single day, where you can scream and process out loud and stuff like that. And I've never once felt rejected by God, universe, or something for throwing out pain and FUs and things like that.
To God.
So, sure.
Head turn.
No, I'm certainly early on I would have, but not now. So those are my three things. Grieve together, but at a certain point you move on. And now this is not really the question, but at some point I have made peace with, you look at, Mormonism is going to survive. It's not going to explode and be off the face of the earth. If I'm capable of, and I think I'm showing that I am capable of, staying in and being a witness for the good things, to give voice to the pain of the people who are missing because of these struggles or something, if I can do that, it feels like a good thing. Like Thomas says, we don't know that it's not an unadulterated good. William James says, we never know what our good is, our actions are good until we hear the cries of the wounded left in our wake. In other words, but we still act. So I'm able to do it. I'm trying to be sensitive to see the LGBT young man there and make sure he is acknowledged and welcomed on a Sunday. And I miss having some of the voices here that would have been doing the same. But
Another moderator pause. I've certainly had a love-hate relationship with what my friends represent. But recently I made some really aggressive post on Facebook about how people who stay in the church, maybe they're complicit in the harm that's done. I've from two different channels. One is from Wendy Montgomery, who's one of the Mama Dragons, who read this beautiful story from the Mama Dragons Story Project about why she stays. And then the other example, one of my favorite people in the world, my cousin Brett Parkinson, he's here. His daughter Greta gave me a very similar response. The response was from both of them, I go to church every Sunday to be there for that young gay or lesbian child or young adult or adult who would need a friend in that context where if I weren't there, they would feel a little bit less safe, a little bit more brutalized, and I go to help be a balm and a support to those people. And I thought to myself, that's an argument I have not found a negative response for. In fact, in some ways it feels like a very sacred decision, knowing how punishing church has been for me, for someone to decide, in spite of the punishment, I'm going to go to be that support for people who might need that support most. It's one of the most powerful things I've heard. So I have, maybe I'm surprised a bit that I'm even holding this event tonight, and it's certainly not because I want to stand as this position being the one that I advocate explicitly. At the same time, I have a bit of a renewed reverence for those who feel like called to this position, because who else is trying to be that positive voice from within, both for positive change, but also for those who are still suffering within. So I find a lot of beauty there. So sorry, that's my editorial moment. So I'm going to clap for you. Still with a love-hate relationship, but with a lot more respect as well. So where do you see us going? There's this, the past couple years have been kind of brutal, and there's a lot of people who have jumped ship, and there's a lot of people who want to say that the church is sort of going to reach this tipping point where the future may be a lot less bright, that maybe even the church will go the way of Protestant Christianity and other Western religious traditions, where it's going to start being in decline. And in some ways, maybe even it's the sinking good ship Zion, in a sense.
yeah.
Where do you guys see, guys and women, where do you see this heading?
Woman.
I mean, do you live with the threat of being punished by the church? Do you see this taking hold, what you're advocating for taking hold and growing? Do you see people rising up, leaders from within, to try and cut it off? And how are you seeing the future of the positions that you're advocating for? I think should we do Thomas, Gina, Dan? Is that all right? Sure. We'll go in that order. What's the future for what you guys are representing, or do you even have a sense for it? I know you're going to say I live in the now.
Say I don't know, he likes it.
Or I don't know, right?
I don't know, John. I have a thought about that, and it's a little bit of a developmental perspective on it. Almost by definition, when we grow, when we move through a transition of identity, we feel repulsion towards the former stage that we're leaving. Like whatever we were before, we find it totally distasteful, totally inadequate. We want to distance ourselves from it as much as possible. It's to say that when we develop, which we all do, we run the risk of divorcing ourselves from the prior stages of development that is actually our root bed. It's the former stages that get us to, the actual crown of the tree. It's how we come to blossom. So I see an incredible opportunity in the moment right now in the Mormon Church, which there's unmistakable growth. I mean, the wisdom coming from people tonight and the wisdom sourced from, the collective membership of the church, it's profoundly growthful and evolutionary, and new things are happening. The temptation is to take one step forward and then take 10 steps backwards by divorcing ourselves from the very system, the very root bed that nourishes us. So I hope for a future of Mormonism where we learn to hold one another and really learn to see ourselves and the people in every single stage of development of faith, every moment of transition for every member. If there's a way that we can actually honor the dignity of it, then maybe we'll create a culture where people honor the dignity of our own transitions. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Gina?
I feel like you're asking me to prophesy, which is wonderful.
And see.
Yes.
And reveal.
Yes.
Yeah. Can women do that?
Oh, yes.
Let's see it.
Oh, yes, they can. I believe that there's an energy working, particularly among women. I think there is a spiritual force that we are collecting around us. And so this is me in the spirit of prophecy. Yay.
Verily, verily.
Verily, verily. A day will come where women will rise up in their awesome power, that they will no longer ask men for the priesthood. They will claim the priesthood that they already have. And it will be a sight to behold. And that will change everything. Yeah.
All right.
Wow.
Love it. Got chills. Dan, how do you follow that up? It's a mic drop.
Well,
Drop the mic.
I'll quote scripture. I'll quote scripture.
Thus saith Sophia.
A person might put forth their puny arm and stop the mighty Missouri River or whatever that was, than to stop what's flourishing here.
That's bold.
Well, not that we're going to become dominant in the church, and I'm not even positive that we should, but that comfort level with truly being ourselves, openly saying, that part of Mormonism doesn't strike me well. Here's where I concentrate on, and just being able to share from your personal experience in church. I really think that as we share with each other on the internet, we're learning the power of our own voice, and people are going to no longer be silenced. And so for those that change, we're going to change the community just by naturally being there. Let me say something maybe controversial. I want the church to go super fast, in the directions that I, think. But I think there's actually a proper pace for organizations at this level. And I'm not positive that we're not at about the right pace. Certainly I'm going to say, 20% faster, please, or something like that. But, I changed I'm talking about a 10-year change for me, of the real wrestle. That's pretty dang fast. And just because I'm ready, I have to allow everybody else, to change with me. And I have to honor that I was that certain, sure, this is true. We got the tiger by the tail. I know everything about the heavens and my place within them. And how can, like Thomas says, I'm rejecting myself if I don't hold place of love and stuff for and say grateful that I was able to journey. And so I had Christine Haglund 2 or 3 years ago on my podcast, and she said something, and I'm not going to do a great job with it, but she, as we're talking about change within the church, she says, yeah, I want this, but my mother, who gave her whole life in the paradigm of correlation and patriarchy and finding her place and saying that she's happy and content and all that stuff. She is beginning to see what I'm revealing in my own life, but I don't want her to feel like this isn't her church anymore too. So in other words, I do think there's this right pace, this incrementalness of just more people showing up who are like us, who are speaking up and things like that, that will move us along. And certainly, leaders are always going to be called probably from the more conservative core. But, when you're raised in an environment like Thomas talks about, it's all invisible to you. You're going to naturally. Women's voices are just like, how can you deny the power and the spiritual gifts? And at a certain point, they're going to be like. I've done that. It was fun. 15 or 20 years, I just go, this woman will be the greatest bishop on the earth. And more people are gonna just see that naturally.
Or that gay man, or that lesbian woman, or
totally.
that trans person.
It's just, without even thinking it'll work. But, we're all ticked because it's not going as fast as we want it to, but I'm going to at least say, well, yeah.
Say it again.
She says, wait till the women really do rise up with their voices like she's talking.
Did your battery go? Did your battery go out? We may have a battery go out. Did you want to repeat?
And I just said, I think we're working at a man's pace. Wait till the woman rear up.
Oh, okay. We're
Things
working
will
at a
go
man's
a
pace.
lot quicker.
Beautiful. So, if that doesn't come back on, Dan, I'll need you just to hold it to your mouth like a microphone and share it with Gina. So one question for those of us who have been kicked out, or for those of us who just said, beautiful story, I can't abide, and they've chosen to leave. What do you have to say to them? Dan, you go first, then Gina, then Thomas. Nope.
Oh yeah, sorry. Just keep growing. Mormonism didn't work for you. Don't think that that's every religion. To me, there's a spirit. I think our lives are better when we're in dialogue with this deep core, as well as what we say and think. And I think science and religion both have important things to say. And so I keep that dialogue going. But don't just think because a particular brand of Mormonism that was in your house versus my house,
You put it on now.
Okay. I'm saying don't treat that as Mormonism altogether. Hopefully you'll consider other things, but just keep growing. I truly, it doesn't seem like it, but I'm destination neutral as far as being within Mormonism. But if you're going to leave Mormonism,
What do you mean by that?
I mean,
So to somebody who's like, God's out of the picture for me, this is the only life I have, I'm an atheist, I'm an agnostic, and I don't want to ever step foot in a church again, what do you say to that person? It's what you just said, but go ahead and say it.
Yeah, go down that path. I certainly tried, and again, it's going to sound like, oh, you'll come back, like that sort of thing. I'm just saying I believe that I know from my own experience that my life is better when I'm not relying just upon my brain, just upon my own will, just upon all those things.
Just
And
upon
that-
logic,
and,
just
and
upon
that there's,
science.
That there's centers of energies and levels. Religion at least is comfortable talking in those fields and things like
And
that.
it's more than
so I don't say-
emotion.
just don't cut. Yeah, no.
It's more than emotion.
No.
It's more than community.
I've felt emotion, and I've had profound spiritual experiences. They are not the same.
To you.
I mean,
yeah.
you know, and again, not lots of people I
Yeah,
know
yeah, yeah,
haven't
yeah,
had
yeah,
them.
yeah. Yeah, that's right.
You know, but there are befores and afters in my life. You know, I'm forever changed by this experience. And even though I'm living my regular life and I'm doing things and I'm getting all caught up in drama and stuff like that, eventually those always kind of remind me and say, oh, well, this can't be all of it because you got to hold that in tension with this. And so I'm grateful for profound spiritual experiences, grounding experiences, these ones that, you know, I don't know, remember the movie Contact with Matthew McConaughey talking to Jodie Foster about this. It's like, you know, science couldn't touch this, you know, with his all right, you know, that kind of accent and stuff like that. I'm grateful for those, even though
That's a Texas microaggression, by the way.
I'll forget those things in the daily drama, but I would love to have everyone just be at peace with themselves and the universe and all that stuff. I really don't think I've made a decision based upon the afterlife or am I pleasing God or anything like that in 15 years. It just, somehow or other, I found it. I found something. You know, it's obviously a continual thing, and I feel like I'm still growing, and God's, you know, or the universe is serving up different things for me. But I don't even remember where the original question was. So I just rambled.
No, that's beautiful.
I rambled too long, but
But I also heard, so I heard you say, whatever path you're on, follow
yeah,
it.
Follow it, and I hope it includes something like this. That's what I would say.
And I think I heard you say, keep growing and developing.
Yeah.
Don't give up on
Yeah.
growth and development, even if religion isn't a part of
Exactly. And God
form.
was a trigger word for me for a while. Spirit was a trigger word for me for a while. I mean, again, I trusted that I have had an arc of growth, and every idea early in my marriage when I was going through all this, I'd serve up to my wife. You know, I would be trying it on for size, but she thought I was forever there. So, golly, explore everywhere. And if I can tell you anything, I don't think that God cares one bit whether or not you're Mormon. If there is a God, you know. But
You said if there's a God.
yeah, well, I
But
don't
you
know.
talk like there is. You talk like you have a relationship with the God.
Well, I have faith in God, and God's an easy language for me.
But for you, you're a bit agnostic.
Sure, I don't know what God's like or something. I would say for me, I'll just share probably why I feel like I'm on, I called it earlier, the human journey, and it's this movement from self-centeredness and from other people's authority and stuff like that into my own self, and this, and again, a philosophy, temperament and all that stuff. I'm okay with both andness, and I'm okay with you know, mythic truth and symbolic truth. I just have a real comfort level with that. I lost my train of thought, but it has to do with just.
I was asking about God and whether there's a God for you.
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
agnostic.
Yeah. I was going to give you my little. Honestly, because of this, and this feels like the natural thing. The thing about Mormonism is so great is it's calling us to just keep growing forever, right? And so to me, it's just like I imagine myself down the road. If I kept on this path, I can at least see the Mormonism sort of affirming a personal deity. But then I was telling Thomas, I had a non-dual experience a few years ago, you know, where I really truly felt like all categories are possibly, you know, there. I've always kind of said, you know, Buddhism talks about, you know, eventually you stop reincarnating and the drop returns to the ocean. And I was like, oh, what a loss of the personal that would be. But I haven't experienced it, you know. But that was the closest thing I had to say. And it was more like less of a loss of me and more of a gaining of everything. You know, and again, it's an experiential
Buddhist,
thing
yeah.
that I barely
Interesting.
have touched around. So I don't know that there's a God, but it's language that works for me. And if you listen to me on the podcast or something, the God I'm believing in is always compassionate. You know, there's
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Beautiful. Gina.
So what about somebody
What would
who
you
wants
say
to,
to the?
I'm atheist
What would you
and I'm
say
a-
to the people who've been kicked out, or the people who felt like they had to leave, or even the people who say, I'm just not interested in religion, anything that smells of religion? What's your message for them?
Okay. Very simply, number one, for the people who've been kicked out, when I'm an apostle, you will be reinstated to the church.
If you want to come back. Yeah.
So that you can choose. For those people who want to leave, God bless you. You're still my people. I love you, and flourish. That's all.
That's all right. That was a shorter answer than Dan's, by the way.
Oh, that was a really long
every
answer.
time, and I am
I'm
feeling
just kidding, Dan.
conspicuous
I'm
about
just giving you a
that.
hard time. Thomas.
Yeah, what comes to mind in the moment, I love the doctrine in Mormonism that we all bear the light of Christ, right? That we're made of the same stuff as divinity. And for people who have been kicked out, for people who are leaving, who just can't make it work, if the language of having the light of Christ doesn't work, I would say that we all have a basic goodness, right? And that we can trust that basic goodness. So I'd say to those people, trust your basic goodness, and you will love where it takes you and who you become in doing that.
Nice.
Can I jump in again real quick?
Super quick.
Okay. Tom, yeah, because I'm already conspicuous, I said that. If you're going to leave Mormonism, though, I hope you'll leave the most robust version of it and not a cardboard version of it. Thomas said something a month or so ago when I was in a setting with him. You know, if you're still in pain, if Mormonism is still triggering for you, if it's still this thing, that's a sure sign that you have work to do to make peace with it in some way. Again, it doesn't mean that you're going to make peace with it and I'm going to be back in it. But somehow or other, we have to have a healthy relationship with all of our homes and all of our stages, like he was talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know if you wanted to.
No, that's good. Thanks,
Expand on
Dan. Yeah.
Is this working? Is this on? Can you hear me? Okay. All right. I've really enjoyed our conversation. It's way better than I even anticipated, and I had high expectations. What's so funny?
Nothing, John.
I had high expectations. Now's the time to open up the mic. So I would love anyone who is interested, who loves, who wants to thank these beautiful people, anyone who's angry at them and wants to yell at them, anyone who just has a sincere question. The mic is yours right here. Please queue up and contribute a little bit. Can someone tell me what time it is? Shout it out.
9:12.
9:12. Okay, yeah. Let's get 5 or 10. Steve.
Say if they want to be on camera or not.
Yeah, if you want to be on camera, just thumbs up as you walk to the mic and Steve will shine it. All right. Go ahead. John Ogden, right?
Yeah, that's right. I just have a pragmatic question. Just what does your daily spiritual practice look like in unorthodoxy?
Who are you asking, John?
So go Thomas,
yeah,
Gina, Thomas,
right.
Gina, Dan.
Yep.
And brief answers.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Thomas.
What is our practice in unorthodoxy?
What's your spiritual practice? So I'm looking for ways to grow spiritually in unorthodoxy. And I'm looking for pragmatic suggestions of how to do that.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say that in the different traditions, a really classical polarity is stillness and movement. And I found that like really being intentional about bringing stillness into my day dynamizes the movement, right?
Great.
So from stillness to motion every day. But the stillness is so key, and our culture probably won't give it to us. We have to take that for ourselves.
And does that take the form for you in meditation, mindfulness, practice?
Well, call it anything. I don't care what it's called, but just the stillness. Anything can happen in that.
So being still, moments of just stillness.
Just being still in the body and the mind and the spirit.
5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, whatever
Yeah.
it comes.
Yeah.
Stillness. Gina.
I struggle with being still. And I also struggle with like kneeling, praying, because I think our body weight, like our body's sort of, physicality as women isn't conducive to kneeling. I prefer the whole notion of just sort of lying and allowing, whatever in the cosmos to rest upon me. I'm in this, and I'm speaking as a woman and a womanist. I'm in this sort of odd space where I'm having to shuck off the notion that the only deities that I can access, the only practices that I can access, are really sort of male-centric. They're full of masculinity. So I would say that my daily spiritual practices are working on my own practices as a Maori woman and what rests in that. In conversation with other women, it's sort of an emergent thing, so I can't give you... Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah.
That was really good.
Dan?
It's evolved for me right now, a half hour a day, quite protected time, usually 5 to 10 minutes worth of reading. I've been doing a lot of Richard Rohr lately. I did some stuff on addiction and recovery, so I was kind of in the big book for a while. And then I just try to sit. I'm not really a mantra meditator or something like that, but there was somewhere along the line a while ago, I can almost like find a channel, a stillness channel, or a sort of a flow state channel, and usually within a few minutes I can kind of get there. Things will come up for me that I don't really want to deal with right now, so I keep a pad of paper next to me to kind of, that's a thing for today or something like that. And I just try to just see what comes up. Sometimes I certainly go longer than the half hour, but I always try to at least have, I'd say a 20-minute practice of some sort of meditation contemplation.
Thank you.
So.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. Next question.
Do you want to come over?
Hey, I've been listening to this therapist named Brene Brown, and she kind of makes a connection between shame and certainty. Like the shame that we feel produces the certainty that we need to feel. And I feel like that's so present, and I'm wrestling with it so much every time I go to church. Like the need to feel shame almost, like the pressing the shame onto me personally, and then also the need that I need to declare certainty also. And I'm just wondering if that's something that you currently wrestle with as well, or if it's you have.
Someone specific? You want to direct it
any
at
of you, yeah.
any of them?
Yeah.
All right. Volunteer. You got something. Shame and certainty. Is that the kind of...
Thanks for your question, Tassi. Shame, I don't anymore. I used to, but I felt that was just unproductive. So I struggle mostly with feeling guilty about anything. And certainty I also find really unproductive because, I think my faith is, increasingly, whatever it is, God has wrestled my hand open so that I hold my faith with less of a tight fist as that nice lady who wrote that Monkey Town thing, Rachel Held Evans. So I know, but that's been an evolution. But certainly in terms of spiritual nourishment and power, holding the uncertainty as something sacred has yielded much more spiritual and fulfilling results. And I think shame is deeply unproductive. That's not to say repentance isn't unproductive or renewal or change is unproductive, but shame is just, it's, I think it's an evil.
So there's a lot of people queuing up. Any quick addition to Gina? It's okay to pass. If you got a response, just keep it
Thanks,
tight.
Tassi.
Is that good? Dan?
Yeah, just something I was just going to say, there are different temperaments, and so the fact that not everyone has that particular thing, I think that's almost a product of just kind of a temperamental thing, which there's no judgment of good or bad, or but it's certainly a challenge that I honor and hope that you'll, find success for.
And Brene Brown's a big thumbs up.
Yeah, Brene Brown's amazing.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Next question.
Please.
Well, thank you guys. This question's more for Tina. I think a lot of, in fact, if not most of the feminist Mormons, they feel that a lot of the ethical problems that we have in the church stem from the structural imbalance. So how do you cope with that? We saw how Kate Kelly went, and it's just, I think that a lot of, especially the friends I talk to, they say, there's no way. It's too authoritative. There's no way. I mean, how do you cope with that?
I've said this other places. I'm mostly a womanist. So my feeling is that, I don't ask. It was really difficult for me to go to OW and ask to be led into, because I'm a brown girl. Brown girls don't ask. So as a womanist, what I want to see is the reconciliation of the sexes. And I'm not saying that in an essentialist way that all women need to be this way and all men need to be this way, that masculinities and femininities need to be reconciled. And so that comes from here. It doesn't come from permission from anybody else. And I think that as women, it is a spiritual practice to understand the power that we have, the enormous sexual power that we have. And I'm not talking about shagging everything. What I'm talking about is that being present in our bodies, claiming our body's power as women, and bringing that into the church. I mean, that's phenomenal. Think about it. All of these women claimed their sexual power, their huge feminine power. Imagine, the watershed that it would happen, on a daily, on a weekly basis at church. It's enormous. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Mm-hmm. So are you advocating for more of a grassroots movement where all the women kind of retake that power in order to kind of move up through the authority?
No, not move up through the authority, claim our own authority.
Uh-huh.
We don't need male permission for what we already have.
And I think that'd be an interesting follow-up, how to do that. I'm sure it sounds awesome, and I think it is awesome, and I'm sure you're wondering how to do that
right.
in a ward. And that's probably its own podcast, but
all right,
let's
we'll
put
do
a pin in that.
We'll do a podcast.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm really excited to ask this question because it's been months. So I'm asking it even though it's probably offensive.
Hi, Rhett.
Hi, Gina. So you'll probably want to unfriend me on Facebook after I ask this one.
Happy to do that.
But and John, if there's a psychological answer to that, or psychology answers it, then I'd love to hear from you too. But at this point, maybe it's because my wife left and I'm fresh. I'm 10 months out. But when Tyler Glenn spat on Joseph Smith, I don't even think that was a show. I think that's justified almost, because all the history that I've read, except maybe the Kirtland Temple, I think is just bullshit. And but even though I feel that way, and I feel as strong as Tyler does, I will feel pulls to come back, and that's why this thing is so interesting to me. But then I'll think to myself, maybe I'm thinking that only because I like to think, at least I have this personality to accomplish things in life, and just a personality to be very driven and motivated and be great. And if I allow for the shelf to fall even further, and then I'll just feel like a slug, and there's no point to life, and who am I, what's my identity, and I won't do anything in life. And I feel like you three are obviously very successful. Gina, I know you are, and so that maybe it's just that personality.
It's okay.
Yeah, you guys, I don't know, but Gina for sure.
Not financially.
But you guys are so driven and have that personality, that just that innateness that you have is what really, in large part, drives you to be Mormon, because you have this identity to begin with. So do you feel that that's fair? Am I off? Et cetera?
I think it's fair. Yeah. We're just big mouths. Yeah.
Just big mouths, she says.
Yeah.
I didn't get your name, I'm sorry.
Rhett.
Oh, it's Rhett, R-H-E-T-T.
Rhett? Just listening to your question, I want to ask you, what matters to you right now? Sounds like you're in a moment and your life is really reorganizing. I just wonder, what's next for you?
So, professionally, for instance, I want to start a business.
Yeah.
But I'd get so obsessed buying books. Instead, when I had a few leads to follow up on a day, I was at Benchmark Books, buying Michael Quinn, just so I could read more. And I get obsessed, and I only will, I'll I'll only be able to work like a few hours a day, and I'll obsessively study Mormon history.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is not helping me at all. Like, this is not helping me in my own life goals and things.
Yeah.
And I just feel like I know a lot of my friends who have like these life goals, and so they can't even start reading about Mormon history or getting caught up in the LGBT stuff, because then they're going to get totally screwed over in their lives by thinking about everything that isn't the life goals, right? So that's me.
Thank you. Well,
Love it.
Yeah.
Love the vulnerability. Did you have a response for him,
Yeah,
Thomas?
Thomas.
I'm just going on an intuition here, but it would feel really powerful to just name what you want. I mean, you're talking about a perception of what the three of us are doing. One of the three of us being successful, and the other two are in quantity.
Kind of a little bit, Mark, a little bit.
No, but seriously, I mean, just listening to you and being present to you, right? I want to hear like what you want, right? And if you can name that and claim that.
You want to get my wife and I back together? That'd be another one. I don't know. Like, I'm happy to talk about it more, but why don't we have more time to talk? And I don't know if that was getting to the question of I just feel like personalities often keep people in the church, basically.
That's what I meant by
I think
church
you're right.
temperament.
I think you're right.
Certainly a factor.
Yeah.
And I like what Thomas is saying here, like Brett, and it ties back to what Dan said about just, I like the question, what do you want? And I like the suggestion to follow the goodness. Like, what if this is an opportunity for you to discover who it is you want to be and what it is you want to be? And what if this is an opportunity for you to get on your path? And church, no church, like it's your path. Mm-hmm. And what if you were to be able to, after the pain, after the processing, after the screaming and yelling and frustration, what if after that processing, it began this beautiful journey for you? And it becomes the best thing that ever happened to you when it seemed like the worst thing that ever happened to you. What if that's the question and the opportunity for
Nice,
you?
John.
It's beautiful.
Right.
So when I have more money, I'll ask you to be my psychologist. Maybe.
Thank you. Thank you for the question.
No,
It's
it's
beautiful.
good, really.
Thank you, Rhett.
Thanks for your open heart.
Yeah. Vulnerability is beautiful.
So I'm wondering in what ways we can encourage a dialogue in our communities about spiritual experience, when often church leaders sometimes encourage members to keep quiet about uncorrelated spiritual experiences.
Thanks, Anders.
Thanks, Anders.
Well, it seems to me that it's those ones where people are like extreme and look at me and this phenomenal thing happened to me, and they're mostly probably reacting to those. I would say, as far as if you have spiritual experiences that come up for you to share, my guess is they wouldn't have any problem with that, because you're going to warm that with, and here's the effect that it had on me. This is why I'm transformed for the better from this, rather than I'm just trying to impress you because I'm, I got the flashbang, wowie zowie kind of thing going that I'm guessing that they're doing. But I've never gone wrong in a class meeting in these last 10 or 15 years where I kind of, it's a skill set to almost like talk, across experiences, to simply say, when this subject comes up for me, I go here, and here's why. And that's just talking about spiritual experiences. That's talking about life journey. And that's what I would say. But I don't know how to have formal conversations about it, So, I don't know.
Can I jump in on that? Please. I love what you're saying. What it's bringing up for me, Anders, is I just think about the long history of dysfunction in Buddhism, of how do we talk about awakening. And the moment one person talks about, I've awakened, then the ego's online and everyone's talking about, did that guy actually awaken? And we're comparing our spiritual experiences. So what you're pointing to is it's a clear and present danger in any spiritual tradition that we have authentic experiences and they're empowering and they can go to our heads, right? But like Dan, you said so beautifully, I just wanted to echo it, that if we manifest the virtue of the experience, forget the storytelling and how special it makes us that we're enlightened or whatever, if we just manifest the virtue of, like, I'm just totally in love with you. I love everything about you. I love your life. I love that I get to be in fellowship with you. I don't know a lot of Mormons or anyone otherwise that isn't willing to be loved that way, so it's...
Nice.
One of my favorite people on the planet, Dr. Brett Parkinson, my cousin. Please, next question.
I love my cousin.
Thank you, cousin.
I came tonight expecting to agree with all of you and to be enlightened and to walk away spiritually fed. Instead, I've come away frustrated, and that's a good thing because it's challenged the way I think. And here is the frustration. You've described a church tonight that sounds terrific. A church that is moving forward, that's progressing, but that's not the way I see it. I don't think it's the way the institutional church sees it. Were there general authorities here, I think that they would find this very upsetting. We are still governed by the proclamation of the family. What happened in November is fresh for many of us. If my gay son were still alive, I think that proclamation would have killed him twice. So my question to you is, how do we stay in this church and be good citizens? And full disclosure, I still do go to church, with that still looming in the horizon. What is our duty to our LGBT brothers and sisters and those who have been disenfranchised? If we continue in the church the way we have and we make good when we go to church and we're polite, isn't it like golfing at the country club that excludes blacks or Jews or anybody else that is not like those inside? So I want to know what you all think is the best way for us to fight this. My wife said, just like my daughter Greta, that the reason she's going to go to church is so she can tell people that she thinks the policy is wrong, and she wants to reach out to those young gay people. I want to know what you all think is the best way for us to handle this, because as far as I'm concerned, that's the elephant in the state, and not just the GOP.
Go, Dan.
Well, I've certainly talked around that a time or two, at least earlier tonight, and maybe that's
Don't-
what frustrates you, yeah.
Right, and don't talk around it. I want this spoken directly to. And I want to put you on the spot because I know that you are very good on your feet. You're all good on your feet, but I think we need some direct answers.
Yeah, Dan.
Dan.
I came to the conclusion probably 10 years ago that if I were to have had a gay child, or even now if one came out and they say, Dad, it causes me so much more pain that you're in the church, I would absolutely be completely gone. My guess is, for lots of people, though, they can see that I am fighting. I am out there. My wife and I ended up both bearing our testimony a time or two ago about LGBT things and pain and whatnot. And so we're doing our part within the church. And so the fact that I'm temperamentally able to do that, that I'm autobiographically, positioned in such a way that I can do that, I am fighting. I'm as fighting as hard as anybody else, I believe. But I'm not making nice on Sunday necessarily. So that's where I think maybe
And that's great on a ward level, but I'm talking about at an institutional level. What can we do to move the institution? Because it took 100 years for our black brethren and sisters to be able to enter the temple. I don't want to wait another 100 years.
True.
Gina, you take a stab, and then Thomas, if you have a stab.
I come from a democratic socialist republic of New Zealand, and we, I was percolated in the grassroots and the power of the people. So I don't make nice at church, honestly. I say, yeah, I'm going to pour some love and compassion, but I never make nice. And I've made it very clear where I stand. And I just, and I see people, some people very afraid to do that because it's painful. It changes your identity. You risk social shunning. And I know that this monolithic sort of institutional church feels like it's impregnable. But I also know that over time, the church has responded to a mood, to a feeling. That's what they do. And I guess it's just hopeful, and maybe it's pie in the sky, but I just think that, I just hope that people would show up with courage and speak their truth and tell their stories. And when you see, gospel doctrine is the worst. Do you know there's all these disembodied heads with arms like that, women who shrink and say nothing because these big-chested men are always putting up their hands and putting the kind of period on frickin' everything. It's like, for goodness sake, shut the hell up, all right? And I think it's time for us to own our voices, however unpopular it may be. And if it's just you and a ward doing that work, then that is sacred work. That's holy. That's what I have for you, Brett.
Yeah, I just want to say, Brett, man, I'm just like really feeling George right now. George is Brett's son. I just want to reiterate that I'm really not okay until your son has an honorary place on the pew in the community. I'm absolutely not okay with it, and I'm not going to stop. I don't know what to do, but I'm not going to stop.
You're not going to stop what?
I'm not going to stop showing up and participating. I'm not going to stop showing up in activism and being alive and being embodied and saying, this hurts too much to be a part of a church like this. It has to change.
Love you, cousin.
Hi, I'm anonymous, and I don't want to be on camera, and I'll tell you why in just a sec. Listen, I love that religion you guys are introducing. In fact, what are we going to call it? Because the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has already taken that name. I don't know. There's such a disconnect, I think. I know we sit here, any given weekend night down at the Marriott Center is filled with thousands and thousands and thousands of students, while the orthodoxy at the pulpit will lay down what the LDS Church really believes and what our tenets really are. But here we are, just maybe 100 of us in a bar in Salt Lake City talking about how we're on the precipice of breakthrough, of how suddenly our views are going to permeate the fortress LDS, and suddenly our wishes of inclusion, of love, of relaxing truth claims are suddenly going to spring into a fruitful reality. The bite is I'm the atheist, but am I the only one that goes to church every Sunday? Because that's where I am. People ask me why. It's a quiet time to sit next to my wife and hold her hand, but it's also my community that I grew up in, that I'm generations in, that I served a mission for, that I married in the temple for, that I served in presidencies, that I gave my heart, my mind, and my soul to. And I sit there, and there is such a disconnect. Gina, you talk about women receiving the priesthood. I no doubt they'll receive the priesthood probably 30 to 50 years after everybody else receives the priesthood in this church. And to say that, Thomas, you use the word esoteric. That's a great word, but sometimes esoteria will distill into something that's palpable, something that's visceral, something that could even be a doctrine. But these ideas discussed tonight, I see them. It's like Givens, Terrell and Fiona Givens, wonderful people, good hearts, flowery words that just float above the reality of the ground, but never quite distill, do they? They're just a bunch of words that I'm like going, well, what was said? What was said here tonight? What? Let's do better. Let's show up. And no offense, Thomas. I'm showing up all the time. And Gina, you say something, and I'm sorry, I'm grouchy. I'm just grouchy because there's not anything said. There's limits to what you can say if you want to keep your membership. That's the reality. Dan, I followed you. You're one of the most annoying human beings on the planet to me because I love listening to you. You have such gems to me. such gems. And you said some things tonight that just, my heart just like, man, I want to just come up and hug you, but I want to come up and shake you. It's like, because, correct me if I'm wrong, you're still an LGT apologist. You still defend the limited geography theory, right? You still have, or do you?
Oh,
I've heard this in past.
No,
No?
I can vouch for Dan.
Okay.
No.
Any
No.
truth claims that you still
No,
adhere to? Okay,
No.
well then
No.
I've heard things wrong.
Sensibilities,
Well,
yeah.
but I've listened to your podcast for a long time, and I don't think I pulled that out of thin air. I think there was a time, and I've listened to you when you with Brian Dalton, when you interviewed Brian Dalton.
that
You-
was an interesting.
Yeah, I mean, he cleaned your clock. For me, I mean, because it's just there's a time to sit down and say this is what is and this is what it isn't, and that's what I just don't get a lot of here. And maybe it's my thinking. Maybe I've got that old Mormon black and white thinking. I don't think so. I'm ready for nuance. But there comes a time when truth is truth. That there are facts, and there are things that work and things that don't work. And this church is pile driving, concrete, whatever you want to call it, indicators that don't point to a more inclusive church. We have proclamation of the family. We're doubling down on exclusion of our GLBT brothers and sisters. We are setting channels that are going to be hard to take out in years to come. Yet here we sit, like I said, just 100 of us, maybe, in a bar in Salt Lake City saying, we're on the precipice.
all right. Beautiful.
That was
I
great.
love that.
Thank
Isn't that beautiful? I love that. Okay.
Yeah, just for a sec. I didn't get your name. You didn't
Well,
want
he
to.
did-
He doesn't want to be
anonymous.
named.
Cool.
He's
No, it's
anon.
not-
I am still in the church.
Yeah.
Anon.
Like I said, I'm an atheist, but I sit in the
Sure.
church because it's my family. It's
Yeah.
my people. It's my sidewalks that get
Okay.
it's my sidewalks that get shoveled, roofs that
Yep.
receive my atheist knells, scouts pulled behind my atheist boat, and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So
There are
friend,
fires built by these
Address him
atheist
as
hands.
friend.
You know?
Okay.
Brother.
I love that shit.
Brother.
good brother.
Brother.
Good brother.
Brother.
You would have fit great in Utah in the
Honor.
1870s.
I wanna-
Build the kingdom, man.
I just want to echo Gina's sentiments here. You know, she said a moment ago that women are already powerful. Women already have the priesthood. They don't have to ask permission.
Thank
I'm
you.
not asking for permission to worship this way. I'm not waiting for the church in 100 years to, include the esoteric in its practices. I'm just doing it right now. That's it.
What? To exercise the priesthood in this organization. Gina.
What?
To exercise the priesthood in this
I
organization.
know, I never said we asked,
no,
receive the
see,
priesthood.
that's not what I'm saying. I'm just pointing out that the way the question is framed, it's as though we're under the church's thumb, and I don't live under the church's
Me
thumb.
neither.
I feel powerful.
No, and that's super, but to participate in this church,
I
in
I
this
still
structure.
participate, but I'm not hailed by the institution. I do it on my own terms, and that to me is spiritual activism.
Yeah, but do you not understand how that comes across as vague, as a kind of a, that's not how, like I said, I sit every Sunday in church. I know how it works. I know what,
Got it.
you talk
okay.
about. Okay.
Last word. Go ahead.
We're vague.
You're too esoteric. You're too vague.
We're esoteric, we're vague, but we're also exercising moral imagination. And I think that is what's necessary to spark a conversation where people can find their feet in the church in the way that they want to. I think this is a sacred conversation, as kind of pie in the sky as it may be. I think that to me is powerful. And I know that what you want is, you seem to want to have something really certain. I don't think we have certainty. What we have is a conversation.
And there's
That's
power for you. A conversation's sacred.
Conversations
sacred
are
conversation.
sacred, yeah.
And I say, right now, your gaze is on the institution. I probably polarize and go to the community, and both are essential. And so to me, the church is not the institution. To me, those BYU students, a third of them are not hearing those words in lockstep. I trust the intelligence and the brains and the life experience, and that doesn't sit right with me. When you're young, you still the story is running you. This is how I get ahead. This is what my life is going to look like and stuff like that. But all those experiences and feelings that they're going to have are eventually going to flower, and there will be change. So I reject the idea that just because it's preached that it's heard.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. We have three more quick questions, and we'll have some quick responses to quick questions.
My name is Elisa, and I apologize, I came in a little late, so I missed some of the conversation. It's been interesting. When I found out the truth about the church, I had been and I tell my friends, just complete and utter sheep-like person. Had turned off my brain when my family joined when I was 7, and I was told this is what was true.
For the sake of time,
yeah.
just because we're running out of time, jump to the question.
I understand what you're saying. I guess it's less of a question, but here's what I wrote. There's a lot of talk about privilege and understanding that. And here's my feeling, just even in the last couple questions, is that you are privileged in your boldness and your self-empowered personalities. I had no way to feel, I had no self-empowering ability to question, to do anything other than exactly as I was told. My question to you is, how do you really teach priesthood? How do you really talk about it in Relief Society? When somebody in my Relief Society mentioned evolution, the gasp in the room. Like, how do you really say it to people? Can you stand up and say, yeah, I actually think that's kind of bullshit, but here's what I learned from it? Or do you kind of, wash it over?
So this is for Gina.
For me, I say it, but I don't say bullshit. I think bullshit, and I say, I do have a question about that, yeah.
They'd listen better if you said that.
What's that?
They'd listen better.
They'd wake up and listen better if you said that.
I just say it.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
so Gina says just say it. Next,
I know that's hard.
penultimate question.
Lightning
Okay,
round.
the question I'm pondering in my mind, and the thing that I think you said, is how you move from other people's authority to your own authority. And in this dogmatic, authoritative church, it seems like you've picked one of the hardest institutions to do that. I have sat in interviews where the stake president has put his elbow on my recommend, saying, you have to do what we say you have to do. If not, I'm not going to sign this.
Oh, I hate him.
And so, me too.
Is obviously not.
So-
And, I've been in the bishopric where, unfortunately, a McConkie was one of the
How
stake
was the
presidents.
last name spelled? Was it I-E or E-Y?
And, his format was question, answer. Question, answer. It's just
Yeah.
so authoritative.
So how do you
I want to
claim-
know in particular,
It's your phone,
a
man.
particular instance about how you would deal with being told, you will do what I say you will do, because we have all the power. I mean, you're choosing to be in the most
Yeah, got it.
church.
Got it. 3 quick answers.
I think
Just Dan?
Dan, yeah.
Okay.
Have you had an experience?
I'll just. Well, I haven't had it. I haven't had. I mean, I was not allowed to ordain my son to the priesthood. I wasn't prepared for that moment. I let it go ahead. I even let that bishop do it because my son was excited to do it, all that stuff. But I had moments of grace in that moment and stuff where I shared that I didn't agree with what had happened and things like that. I don't know that, if somebody's coming at you that hard, sometimes you have to do Tai Chi or something like that where you just, you pivot and counter that sort of energy. But
Dan has a really good episode on Mormon Stories with Tom Kimball on Stages of Faith very early on, where he talks about how he dealt with that and grew from it. Check out that podcast. It's one of my best. Last question.
oh, I thought everyone was going to answer.
Hi, I'm Alex.
Hey, Alex.
Alex.
So, I guess I wouldn't even say it's fully formed yet, but I have kind of a basic direction for it. So, we have the example as recorded in the Bible of Jesus being quite the rebel, quite the
Dissident.
Rebel,
Yeah,
yep.
didn't conform to social norms by any respect, and he did not pull any punches, especially in moments that we have recorded where he says that I am here to turn brother against father, to be a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense, and so I think about that. We have the aspect in the gospel of universal love and inclusion that God intends, and then also that aspect of division. And so basically my question boils down to how do we unify, but also how do we divide in a productive fashion?
Tension of unity and
That's a Thomas question. I think.
All right, Thomas,
Nice.
you get the last word.
Stillness of movement.
Yeah. Just naming the paradox is powerful. Just acknowledging that we need both of them to thrive as a Christian community as Latter-day Saints. I already feel invited to live into that with you, Alex. Yeah.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
Good.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Ponder that.
All right. Boy, the time has flown by really fast for me. I hope it has for you as well. Really quickly, Thomas, talk really quickly about your book. Just real quickly.
Yeah, we have books in back. Come chat to me.
And it's called, the book is?
It's Navigating Mormon Faith Crisis, and it's about transformations of faith in a Mormon context.
So how much are you selling them for?
$20.
$20 in the back. Also available on Amazon.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, check it out. Gina, plug your stuff really quick.
Well, I'm going to plug the food because I was asked to plug the food. The food is good. You should come for the food and share feelings about the food.
The food here?
Yes, that's what I was asked to say. So
Oh.
Tip your wait staff.
and while you're eating, listen to a Thoughtful Faith podcast and read my blog, Kiwi Mormon.
Kiwi Mormon, a Thoughtful Faith podcast. Beautiful. Thank you. Dan.
Mormon Matters is pretty much every week or every 9 or 10 days. We put you through several hours, so don't digest it all at once. It's never homework. Don't listen to anything that you're not interested in, but we'll be there and hosting hopefully good discussions. I'm excited to work with Natasha on this. She'll certainly be the leader
And
there.
for our listening audience, what is
this?
this?
Yeah, this is coming up the end of August. We're going to do like a Friday evening to Sunday right before dinner kind of retreat. We'll feed you. We'll have a bunch of different sessions. It'll be professional, psychologists, counselors, family dynamics, sex therapists, and things like that. I'll probably throw in at least one session on religious framings or something like that. But I
Check
think
out the
this will be good.
retreat.
Yeah. Plus
All right, go to Mormon Matters or Thoughtful Faith to learn about this retreat August 26th to 28th. It's been a joy to have you here. Again, this is brought to you by the Open Stories Foundation. Please support any of these podcasts. You can donate. Monthly donations are great because we can sort of rely on a revenue stream which allows us to hire staff and to serve more people. So please support the Open Stories Foundation or these podcasts with your tax-deductible donations. They will continue to bring much goodness to current and future generations. Thank you for your support here. We have workshops and retreats at Mormon Transitions or at these websites if you want these deep, immersive 1-day or 3-day experiences where you can meet with others and really heal and grow in whatever space you're in. So thank you for your support. Thanks to all who made this possible. Thanks to Club and Cafe at 50 West, to these beautiful participants here, to all of you for coming, to all of you in internet land for joining us. Please tune in again for more Mormon stories, A Thoughtful Faith, Mormon Matters, Mormon Transitions, Gay Mormon Stories, etc., etc. Have a beautiful night. Drive home safely. We love you, and thank you for coming.